I'm gonna take one for the team here and say that the most frustrating feedback when you're stuck is trust the process. Dude, if I had a process, I would totally do it. Like, the problem is that for situations like these, we don't know what to do. We are extremely lost. And if you are, you clicked on the right video. Today we're gonna have a chat about a series of mechanisms that I use and I swear by to get unstuck in the creative process. But I warn you, things might get a little crazy. Just before we get started, it's very nice to meet you. I'm Lola, I'm an architecture student. I've been now through 4 years in a creative university. I've also worked with graphic design and both my parents are actually graphic designers too. I managed to get some of their more professional advice and it's right at the end of the video, so make sure to watch it until the end if you want to get the full content. Let's get into it! I'm here on my bed. I really want you to feel as comfortable as possible right now because the first topic we're going to talk about is tension and pressure, perfectionism. Often what happens is our creativity is actually linking to our self-worth. And I hate this because I feel it so much. I actually struggle with that a lot at university. And this happens usually when you're holding on to something so hard because of fear oftentimes of failure or because of your own expectations. When we feel tense, all we want is space and peace. And you need to give that to yourself by detaching yourself from your ideas. And this detachment is so intrinsic for the creative process to be fluid because you actually give space to move forward. And for that I have a method. I did not create it. It's not mine. Don't say I'm crazy. Sometimes I like to think of my ideas as if they were already floating somewhere and they chose me. For some reason, this specific idea, because of my history, context, skill set, opinions, I would be the only person that would be willing to bring it to fruition. All of these ideas floating out there, all they want so bad is to come to reality. And they choose us. And I was very resistant to this method when I heard of it because ego, right? I was like, if I'm not coming up with the idea, then I'm not credited for it. I'm not creative. I want it to be regarded as this amazing idea that came from me. Again, the ego, the perfectionism, these are things that only get in the way. You need fluidity, and these ideas need you to come to reality. That's their life goal. And the only way they can do that is through us. And you just need to let it guide you. It will guide you because it wants to come out. And it's this really mystical kind of process where it starts revealing itself to you in parts, exactly like a Polaroid photo. You don't really know what you're dealing with, but something intrigued you enough that you took the photo. And then you have to wait until it's developed so you can see what you actually captured. And that's the whole point of taking a Polaroid photo. Because of that unpredictability of a Polaroid photo, we think it's fun. We let go of our control for the fun that it brings, for the unpredictability. The thing with control is we either like to have full or we prefer to have none. We don't like 50-50s. And in these situations, guys, it's so much better to have none because you let go of all that tension and pressure. But again, you need to put it out into the world. Writing, drawing, modeling, the more you execute, the more material you have to work with. Think of it as kind of like a current, really. You need to have an output for that current for it to go through. If it's not going anywhere, it's going to be sitting there and eventually it's going to electrocute you. The more they sit in your head, the more expectations and things you start growing onto it. And these I call weeds. I'm going to tell you a story of the best advice I've ever got in university. I sat down with a tutor and after going through all of my ideas, we decided that I needed to come up with a new concept because none of my ideas were really matching with what I needed to do. It wasn't it. And we've all been through that. Before I actually let it ruin my day, I was like, hey, I'm not really feeling motivated because I feel like everything that I have is not enough. And I thought she was kind of just gonna shrug her shoulders and walk away and say, deal with it, right? She didn't. And she said, Lola, they're not really good ideas, but you needed to get them out of your brain to realize that they're not good ideas. And the good thing about getting those bad ideas out of your brain is that now they've stopped bothering you. So she was like, every time you feel like you have this tiny little, I don't know, scrap of something that's stuck in your brain, get it out. And that's one of the best things I've ever heard, because until then, I always thought if it's a bad idea, you don't pursue it, you don't draw it, you don't bring it to reality. That idea that came to you and wants to get out, it's gonna come with its weeds and you're gonna misinterpret it sometimes. And this is why you need to get it out, because you need to see it with your eyes. And this is when I think you need external feedback. When you get to a point where you have so much output and you need guidance to know how to distinguish the weeds from the big idea. But if you have a lot of output and you don't have anyone to ask for feedback, the big idea is usually the one that's slightly bolder, the one that's slightly more intriguing to you, the one that's slightly incomplete, or something that you are uncertain about, that you want to discover more. That's usually what I found to be the best idea. Inconsistent creativity. Creativity is rooted in our unconscious, and a lot of the books that I've read recently, funny enough, have mentioned the importance of communicating with your unconscious mind via repeated actions. The same way that our brains tell our bodies what to do, our bodies can also tell our brains what to do. And it's a really interesting thing that if you start repeating actions every day, for example, before you're going to sleep, your unconscious brain will automatically start to slow down and get into sleep mode, because it knows that when you do that thing, you're about to go to sleep. So the same thing happens with creativity. You could have a ritual. Maybe you sit at the same desk in the cafe and you take 3 sips out of your matcha latte, let out a nice sigh, and that's your creativity ritual. Or like my mom used to do, she used to pretend M&Ms were creativity pills. One of the things that I find work the most well for me is just going to this specific place in the cafeteria that for some reason allows me to be more creative, or somewhere where I know that I'm 100% private and that I can unwind and put my mind to work on whatever I need to work on. And number 3 is also something that I personally struggle with very often, which is trying to spot the destination too early. Anne Lamott, in her book Bird by Bird, used this analogy that I love and hold so dear. Creating is kind of like driving at night, when you can only see as far as your headlights go, but you can easily do the whole trip that way. When you're driving, you're paying attention to the obstacles, because you need to spot a hole. You need to see if maybe a rabbit's not gonna run through the street. These things that can cause delays. Every one that you pass through is a little success. We need to shift from wanting to have created something to wanting to be creating it. And I think that's so deeply enlightening, because we often forget that the most enjoyable part of all of this is creating. It's the small victories. It's realizing that you overcame a small problem today, and that means you did your work today. And because I told you I would come with my parents' professional advice, here is it. So mom, when she's stuck, she usually focuses on going back to research. Maybe she missed something. And she said when she researches more, she naturally gets more inspiration and more ideas as she widens her knowledge about the topic that she's designing for. And also said if she doesn't find inspiration from the research, she'll often take a walk or maybe read a magazine or speak to some friends to try and find that inspiration somewhere. Whereas my dad focused a lot more on having a good reference or references, not in the idea sense of the word reference, but as people of whom you look up towards, people of whom you look at and you see their methodology of solving problems, people of whom you can try and approach your problems from their perspective, because I feel like when we look up to people, when we have these references, these people that we think are so great at what they do, we tend to become a little bit like them. If you don't have references, go look for some references. And on this note, because Bird by Bird has become my favorite book and Anne Lamott has become my favorite writer in the last few months, I'm gonna end with another quote from her book. The function of freedom is that you can free somebody else. And so she says, if you're no longer racked or stuck to a person or a way of life, tell your story. Risk freeing somebody else. So if you have a different tactic or a different way to dealing with being stuck creatively, leave it in the comments and risk freeing somebody else. I'll remind you that if this video helped you in any way, please subscribe and like this video so that YouTube can push it to reach more people. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye guys!